We the People Will are proud to present this video for your consideration.
This is an ABC News special report.
Good morning, I'm George Stephanopoulos, and we are coming on the air because we have just learned that the U.S. ambassador to Libya has been killed. It happened overnight. When angry militants stormed the U.S. consulate in Benghazi, Libya, they fired shots, set the building on fire. Almost a dozen Americans were inside being guarded by Libyan security. At least one other American died, most likely of smoke inhalation. And it appears the attack was inspired by an anti-Muslim film produced by an American-Israeli filmmaker living in California. Martha, this is the first U.S. ambassador killed on duty in an attack since 1979.
It is indeed, George, and it's terribly, terribly horrific for the State Department and everybody who knows Ambassador Chris Stevens. He is a beloved member of the State Department diplomatic corps. He loved Libya, was passionate about Libya, has been there since the revolution, and just started as ambassador this past May. This has been breaking overnight.
I also want to take a moment to address the video circulating on the internet that has led to these protests.
The death of an American ambassador as the Arab Spring threatens to turn into an autumn of discontent.
We've seen rage and violence over an awful internet video.
Did the administration have any sort of heads up?
And this is a matter that's under investigation.
They panicked.
Can you speak with us briefly about the attack in Benghazi?
This is not an appropriate time.
We are in a stronger position today than we were 4 years ago.
Does the Obama administration have a problem calling the threat by its name?
The suggestion that anybody in my team would play politics or mislead is offensive.
As people get to the U.S. Embassy in Sana'a, it was extraordinary to me. It's one of the most heavily defended buildings in the country.
At the time of the attack, the U.S. military did not have any personnel in Benghazi.
Here, it's not normal for Libyans to go to any kind of demonstration carrying RPGs, taking heavy anti-aircraft machine guns with them.
There were clashes. 3 protesters were reported injured, one in critical condition. Gunshots caused the protest to escalate.
Good evening. Tonight, across a huge and uneasy region where Arab Spring has long ago faded into something far more complicated. Today, there were anti-U.S. protests in no fewer than 11 separate locations.
Clashes are still continuing here, even at this late hour, near the U.S. Embassy, and they were not the only ones in this region. This mess in the Middle East isn't over yet.
The protesters in Yemen set out to destroy the American embassy in Sana'a to punish an insult against Islam.
As you are aware, the security guards at the public institutions, including the police personnel, are not well armed. How about if they are confronted by heavily armed groups? There is no proportion in armament. The Interior Ministry is lacking the necessary weaponry and equipment.
Timing, what the administration knew and said, and when it knew and said it, is really at the crux of this entire story. August 2012, an unclassified report called Al-Qaeda in Libya, a profile compiled by the Defense Department's Combating Terrorism Office and the Library of Congress, states that under the direction of Al-Qaeda's senior leadership, Al-Qaeda affiliates in Libya, Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, or AQIM, and Ansar al-Sharia are gaining strength, are likely joining forces, and are, quote, currently in the expansion phase. September 10th. A video surfaces of Al-Qaeda's emir, its spiritual leader, Ayman al-Zawahiri, calling for jihadists to avenge the death of Libyan terrorist Abu Yahya al-Libi, killed in a drone strike in June. 8:30 p.m. local time in Benghazi, Libya, 2:30 p.m. Eastern. U.S. Ambassador Chris Stevens says goodnight to a visiting Turkish diplomat, escorting him to the front gate of the consulate's compound. Officials say, quote, everything is calm. There's nothing unusual. There has been nothing unusual during the day at all outside. No protests all day. 9:40 p.m. Benghazi time, 3:40 Eastern. Agents in Building C of the compound and the Tactical Operations Center hear gunfire and explosions at the front gate. An agent sees on his cameras that show the perimeter of the compound dozens of armed men flowing into the compound. The attack is underway, an attack that would last some 6 hours. September 12th.
The U.S. ambassador to Libya, our ambassador, has been killed along with 3 other Americans after a series of attacks.
America's commitment to religious tolerance goes back to the very beginning of our nation. But let me be clear, there is no justification for this.
The United States condemns in the strongest terms this outrageous and shocking attack. We're working with the government of Libya to secure our diplomats. I've also directed my administration to increase our security at diplomatic posts around the world. And make no mistake, we will work with the Libyan government to bring to justice the killers who attacked our people. Since our founding, the United States has been a nation that respects all faiths. We reject all efforts to denigrate the religious beliefs of others.
Fox News already has intelligence sources saying al-Qaeda-linked groups could be behind the attack.
U.S. officials are investigating whether a pro-al-Qaeda group was involved.
It was a coordinated military-style commando-type raid that had both direct fire and indirect fire, military movements involved in it. This was a well-planned, well-targeted event, no doubt about it.
This was executed by a group that is either associated with or sympathizes with al-Qaeda.
September 13th at the State Department. Questions about security.
We did evaluate the threat stream, and we determined that the security at Benghazi was appropriate for what we knew.
There is no justification, none at all, for responding to this video with violence.
September 14th.
The unrest around the region has been in response to this video. We do not, at this moment, have information to suggest or to tell you that would indicate that any of this unrest was pre-planned.
The President and Secretary of State greet the bodies of the fallen at Joint Base Andrews.
We've seen rage and violence directed at American embassies over an awful internet video that we had nothing to do with. It is hard for the American people to make sense of that because it is senseless.
It's pretty obvious that there's very likely that there was a terrorist organization that affiliated with al-Qaeda. It was in Benghazi that had at least some role in this attack.
What our assessment is as of the present is in fact what it began spontaneously in Benghazi as a reaction to what had transpired some hours earlier in Cairo, where of course, as you know, there was a violent protest outside of our embassy sparked by this hateful video.
Intelligence source on the ground in Libya tells Fox there was no protest and the attacks were not spontaneous, the intelligence source said, adding the Libyan attack was planned and had nothing to do with the movie.
September 17th.
Simply on the basis of what Ambassador Rice has publicly disclosed, does the United States government regard what happened in Benghazi as an act of terror?
Again, I'm not going to put labels on this until we have a complete investigation, okay?
So you don't regard it as an act of terrorism?
I don't think we know enough. I don't think we know enough.
Is this an act of war? Are we at war now?
No.
What happens here?
Well, here's what happened. You had a video that was released by somebody who lives here, sort of a shadowy character, who is extremely offensive video directed at Muhammad and Islam.
Making fun of the Prophet Muhammad.
Making fun of the Prophet Muhammad.
And I would say yes. They were killed in the course of a terrorist attack on our embassy.
On a day that Secretary of State Clinton said she's still waiting for answers while the FBI investigates the killing of 4 Americans in Benghazi, Libya, our sources reveal that not one single FBI investigator has set foot at the crime scene. 15 days after the terror attack, not one.
Who made the decision that there should not be Marines in
at our diplomatic posts in Libya. More than half of our diplomatic posts have Marines. I understand they're not there to protect people, they're there to protect classified data, but it doesn't hurt to have them there. Who made the decision?
Well, I think security at diplomatic facilities is overseen by and run by the State Department, so I'd refer you to them.
Reports that the White House said today that the attacks in Libya were a terrorist attack.
We're still doing an investigation, and there are going to be different circumstances in different countries. And so I don't want to speak to something until we have all the information.
September 21st.
What happened in Benghazi was a terrorist attack.
I heard Hillary Clinton say that it was an act of terrorism. Is it? What do you say?
Well, we're still doing an investigation. There's no doubt that the kind of weapons that were used, the ongoing assault, that it wasn't just a mob action. There are no words that excuse the killing of innocents. There's no video that justifies an attack on an embassy.
Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb and other groups have launched attacks and kidnappings from northern Mali into neighboring countries. Now, with a larger safe haven and increased freedom to maneuver, terrorists are seeking to extend their reach and their networks in multiple directions.
It was a terrorist attack. The reason I think it pretty clearly it was a terrorist attack is because a group of terrorists obviously conducted that attack on the consulate.
A Fox News alert. Breaking news now on the deadly terror attack on the U.S. consulate in Libya. Fox News sources telling us CIA officers on the ground in Benghazi during the attack sent requests for help but were denied.
There were 3 separate requests to aid not only the attack that was occurring at the consulate and to try and help with that attack, but also requests for outside help, outside military to help once there were gunfires and firefights at the CIA annex. Those requests, we're told, came from higher headquarters. They were told to stand down. There were, as you know, Glenn Doherty and Tyrone Woods, the former Navy SEALs, were over at the CIA annex at about 9:40 p.m. when the first shots were heard at the consulate where the ambassador and his team were taking fire. I'm told that they radioed to their higher headquarters that they wanted permission to go and help the ambassador, to help the ambassador's teams. At that time, they were told by their higher-ups to, quote, stand down. They waited approximately an hour. They requested again to send Glenn Doherty, Tyrone Woods, and other members of that team to help out at the consulate. They were again, for a second time, told to stand down. They ignored those orders. They made their way over to the consulate against orders. They helped rescue those who had survived at the consulate. They could not find the ambassador. They made their way back to the CIA annex about 1 mile away at midnight. That is approximately, the firing had started at 9:40 p.m., so that is approximately 2 hours and 20 minutes later. They get back to the CIA annex. They begin taking fire almost immediately. 4 mortars are fired at the compound. During that time, there was no problem with communications, I'm told, from sources on the ground. They were in constant radio contact with higher headquarters. They were calling for military support, air support. I've also learned from separate sources that there was at least 1 special operations unit, most likely Delta Force, that was waiting on standby at Sigonella Air Base, about 480 miles from Benghazi. They could have been at Benghazi in approximately 2 hours. They were part of the Commanders in Extremis Force, a SIF they're called in the Special Operations community. They did not take off from Sigonella. Typically, on the ground, when Special Operations Forces are involved in a firefight like this, they can call in air support from what are known as Spectre gunships. These are commonly used by the Special Operations communities, and sources in Benghazi who were involved in the attack say that no gunships were sent, no help was sent, even though the fighting at the CIA annex went on for more than 4 hours. We're also told that those at the CIA annex took into custody 3 Libyan attackers and were forced to hand them over to the Libyan February 17th forces that came to help at the annex at approximately 4 in the morning.
Let me ask you one last direct question. There were drones that were flying over Benghazi at the time of the attack, during those hours when first the consulate and then the annex, and it was about 6 or 8 hours, were under attack. Were those drones armed?
We're going to find that out. As you mentioned, sit on the Intelligence Committee, so does Senator Warner. We're going to get to the bottom of this. We'll find out what happened, and that information, if appropriate, will be revealed.
We came in through the embassy gates and broke the door, and we raised the flag of the Messenger of Allah, and if they repeat this, we will enter again until there are no ambassadors left.
Vice President Biden called the deaths a tragedy, but he then claimed that the Obama administration did not know that Ambassador Stevens and other personnel on the ground had been asking for more security help.
We weren't told they wanted more security again. We did not know they wanted more security again. And by the way, at the time, we were told exactly, we said exactly what the intelligence community told us.
This is a Fox News alert. New evidence in Fox News that the Obama administration knew the Libya attack was an act of terror even as it happened. Fox News has obtained internal State Department emails. The emails showing that an al-Qaeda-linked group claimed responsibility for the Benghazi attack as the assault was ongoing on the U.S. consulate.
This is no surprise. We know that the security guards at the compound in Benghazi were in cell phone contact with the State Department in real time.
We were talking about essentially an 8-hour firefight, Allie, that could have been mitigated greatly from the beginning if you had better force. These guys, the two over there, as Gary talked about earlier, Gary Burnson talked about the fact that the CIA guys had to scramble to go over to assist these other folks.
They were doing it on their own. They were violating orders.
So the number you're talking about here would have made a huge difference in that firefight.
So the big question this morning is, what did they know and when did they know it? And we now know that there were 3 different times that they were told to stand down, these individuals to go in. As Steve mentioned earlier on the show, there was a guy with laser-guided targeting on where these mortar attacks were occurring, and they were told to stand down, not fire on these mortars.
Well, this is insane. There's a lot of mystery to that whole thing. What I'll say about this, and you open with the phone call being picked up and put, basically that phone call was answered, they listened to it, and they put it back down. That's the problem here. Everybody in Washington knew what was going on. Someone made the decision to not render aid. To me, that is the worst thing here. These guys on the ground were lasering something. They thought somebody was coming. So again, there's some breakdown between Washington, the folks in Europe and Italy who had to launch the forces, and the guys on the ground. And let me be very clear on this for the audience to understand. We have never in our history as a military had better, more precise communications in real time, plus the drone feed.
The government is a big operation. At any given time, something screws up. If 4 Americans get killed, it's not optimal. Right. And we're going to fix it.
The president has repeatedly stated that he did everything he could to make sure the people in Benghazi were as safe as possible. But when I went to Libya, when I visited with General Ham, General Ham told me personally that he did not get a call, he did not receive orders to send in the military option. They had proximity, they have capability. It may have taken a little time to get there, but this firefight started at 9:40 a.m. It was still going on into the wee hours of the morning. The president did not do this. You can't have it both ways, Mr. President. You can't say you're using every option and at the same time not using the military option.
If I were to say to you, Lieutenant Colonel, what does 9/11 mean to you?
This last 9/11?
Just 9/11. Like I would say December 7th. What does December 7th? 9/11 usually means...
It's an attack upon the United States of America.
Mr. Nordstrom.
The same.
Ms. Lamb.
The same.
Ms. Ambassador.
Absolutely, sir.
Okay, so if you can all connect the dots right here, why in the heck did it take so long for all these highly briefed and intelligent people to try and figure out that it actually wasn't a 15-minute YouTube video? It actually was a 9/11 event, a terrorist attack?
4 Americans were murdered, including Tyrone Woods. His father was on with Geraldo last night and said the president did not do enough to save his son's life. Listen to this.
Any consulate anywhere in the world is American soil. Your Honor, I respect your office as president, but if this attack on American citizens on American soil happened 2,000 miles away from Washington, D.C., say in Los Angeles or in Seattle, would you have waited 7 hours before you sent the first airplane? Remember this, Mr. President. My son and the others died heroes, and it's better to die the death of a hero than it is to live the life of a coward.
And today, al-Qaeda is on its heels, and Osama bin Laden is no more.
More sound.
Thanks for watching our video. Please go to our website for more information.